Welcome to Module 13. In this module, what we're going to be looking at is the context in which the Newer Testament was put together. Now, we need to remember from the introduction to this during the intensive that the Newer Testament, even though it came together much more quickly than the Tanakh did, we need to still see that there is a process in which that happened. And that process begins from the writing of the first part, or the first writings of the Newer Testament, which we think are most probably Paul's letters in about 45 AC or CE, all the way through to the time of about the end of the turn of the first century. So the writing actually of some of the content of the Newer Testament happens within about a 60-year period. But the actual canonizing of the New Testament, so the putting together and saying this is the official Newer Testament, will only happen 300 years later in the 4th century. And so there's a process of development, there's a process of writing, of copying. We have huge numbers of manuscripts written from papyrus, on clay, on leather, in vellum as it's called, and then of course also just on paper, all the way through that period of that 300 years. We also have access to either material which was written in the same period, so historical material from people like Josephus and Philo and Tacitus, amongst others. And so we have a lot more material to deal with when it comes to the Newer Testament. And yet there's still that process of development, of collation, of putting things together in order finally, before we have what we would call today the New Testament. What we're going to do in these modules is to look at some of that process, but then also to look at the content of the different materials, to see when they were written, why were they written, and some of the understanding of them. In this particular module, we're going to be looking at the world of that first century. So the first century, when most of the Newer Testament was put together, that's what was happening in the world at that time, both the world in which it was being written and the world to which the Bible was being moved and being taken to. In fact, where the early church, the first 100 years of the Christian church. So if we assume that Jesus was born sometime between 7 and 4 BCE, that his crucifixion takes place somewhere around 30 CE, then what we realize is that the Christian church then begins to grow and develop from that point onwards. And it grows rapidly. We realize that even by the time of Nero, Emperor Nero, Christianity, even already then, is already a major player within the Roman space. And so we're going to be looking at that Roman space in which that early church began to develop.